The lights flickered again on the bridge of the Vallani flagship Hope's End. Captain Una pressed her six-fingered hand against the damaged console and felt the ship shudder around her. Another hull breach. Another system failing. Another step. Closer to death in the cold void between stars. "Captain, we've lost another refugee transport," reported Navigator Junsik from his station. His blue-scaled face showed the exhaustion they all felt after months of running. The safe harbor couldn't keep up. The Krex hunters found her. Una closed her large, dark eyes for a moment. 3,000 Vallani families had been aboard that ship. 3,000 souls who would never see another sunrise. She had promised them safety when they fled their burning homeworld. Now she had to live with another broken promise. "How many ships do we have left?" she asked quietly. 47 vessels, Captain. Most are civilian transports with no weapons. We have maybe 6 fighters that still work." The bridge fell silent except for the hum of dying engines. Through the main screen, Una could see the other ships in their small fleet. Each one carried the last survivors of worlds the Krex had destroyed. Each one limped through space on failing systems and desperate hope. Una had been a cargo ship captain before the war. She used to carry trade goods between the 12 worlds of the Vallani Commonwealth, spices from Keelan Prime, art from New Vela, medicine from the research stations. Now she carried the last remnants of her entire civilization. "Captain," called Communications Officer Taman from across the bridge, "I'm picking up something strange. It's a signal from the Outer Rim territories. Very primitive technology, but the pattern is organized. It might be from an intelligent species." "Show me." The main screen changed to display a star map. A small section near the edge of known space pulsed with a weak signal. The computer analyzed the transmission and showed rough translations. "It's coming from a system they call Sol," Taman continued. "The species calls themselves humans. They seem to be new to space travel. Very new. The signal is maybe 50 years old, traveling at light speed." Una studied the data. A young species with primitive technology. Not the kind of allies they needed against the Krex Dominion. But something about the signal patterns caught her attention. "What kind of transmissions are these?" "Strange things, Captain. Entertainment broadcasts, news reports, some kind of historical records about conflicts on their home world." Taman paused, his expression puzzled. "Captain, these humans seem to fight each other a lot. The historical records show thousands of wars." Another officer laughed bitterly. "What good are warriors who fight themselves? We need protectors, not barbarians." But Una felt something stir in her chest, a feeling she hadn't experienced in months. Hope. The Vallani had evolved past warfare centuries ago. They had engineered aggression out of their genetics, choosing peace and cooperation instead. It had made them the greatest traders and diplomats in the galaxy. It had also made them helpless when the Krex came with their warships and their hunger for conquest. "Taman, can you get more information about these humans?" "I've been analyzing their signals for the past few hours, Captain. Their world seems to have many different nations that compete with each other. They've fought wars using incredibly destructive weapons. Some of their historical records talk about conflicts that killed millions of their own people." The bridge. Crew looked uncomfortable. Violence on such a scale was unthinkable to the peaceful Vallani. "But, Captain," Taman continued, "there's something else. When their people are threatened by outside forces, they seem to unite. They have stories about fighting together against common enemies, and their weapons technology advances very quickly during conflicts." Una walked to the front of the bridge and stared at the star map. Behind them, somewhere in the darkness, Krex hunter fleets were following their trail. Ahead lay empty space and the slow death of her people. "What do we have to offer them?" she asked. "Our medical technology is centuries ahead of theirs," said Chief Science Officer Kangman. "Our star maps cover thousands of systems they don't know about. We have rare minerals from the Commonwealth worlds." "And what would we ask for?" The bridge fell silent again. Everyone knew the answer, but no one wanted to say it. Military protection, Yuna said finally. We would be asking a primitive species to fight the most dangerous force in the galaxy. Captain, interrupted the ship's emergency alarm. Red lights flashed across every console. Krek scouts, 3 light hours behind us, reported Yunsik. They're gaining speed. Yuna looked around her bridge at the faces of her crew. These weren't soldiers. They were merchants, scientists, teachers, people who had never hurt anyone in their lives, people who were going to die because they couldn't defend themselves. Taemin, open a transmission toward the Sol system. Captain, it will take 4 years for the signal to reach them at light speed. Then we better make it count. Yuna walked to the center of the bridge and faced the main camera. She thought about what to say to a species they had never met. How do you ask strangers to die for you? Begin recording. The camera light blinked on. Yuna took a deep breath and began to speak. People of Earth, my name is Captain Yuna of the Valani Commonwealth. We are refugees from 12 worlds that once knew peace. We send you this message because we have nowhere else to turn. She gestured to the screen behind her, showing images of Krek's attacks. Burning cities, ships full of crying children, worlds reduced to ash and bone. An empire called? The Krek's Dominion has declared war on all peaceful species in the galaxy. They do not want our resources or our territory. They want to watch us die. They have destroyed our worlds not for profit, but for pleasure. The images changed to show the refugee fleet. Damaged ships limping through space. Families crowded into cargo holds. The last survivors of an entire civilization. We offer you knowledge of the stars, medical advances that could save millions of your people, rare materials worth more than all the gold on your world. In return, we ask for your help. We ask for your protection. We ask you to fight for those who cannot fight for themselves. Yuna paused, looking directly into the camera. We know you are a young species. We know you still struggle with conflicts on your own world. But we have studied your transmissions, and we believe you understand something we forgot long ago. Sometimes, peace can only be preserved through strength. The captain's voice grew stronger, more desperate. If the Kreks are not stopped, they will continue to spread across the galaxy. Eventually, they will find your system. They will come for your Earth. Help us stop them now, and you save not only our people, but your own future. She bowed her head. In the traditional Valani gesture of respect, we await your answer, people of Earth. We hope it comes in time. End recording. Taemin sent the signal toward the distant Sol system. 4 years of travel time. 4 years before the humans would even receive their plea for help. Captain, said Yunsik quietly, will we even be alive in 4 years? Yuna looked out at the stars and made a promise to herself. Her people would survive long enough to see if the humans would answer. They had to. Behind them, the Krek's hunters continued to close the distance. Admiral Do-Yun stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance and watched the alien ships approach. 4 years had passed since Earth received the desperate message from Captain Yuna. 4 years of debate, preparation, and the fastest military buildup in human history. Now 12 human destroyers hung in space near the Kepler 442 system, waiting to meet their first alien allies. They look nothing like their transmission suggested, said Captain Min Seok from the communications station. Those ships are beautiful, but they don't look like they could fight a paper bag. Do-Yun studied the Valani vessels through the main view screen. The alien ships were smooth and curved like works of art floating through space. They gleamed silver and blue in the starlight. No visible weapons, no armor plating. They looked more like passenger cruise ships than anything designed for war. Sir, we're getting a transmission from the lead vessel, reported Lieutenant Jihoon. Put it through. The main screen flickered, and suddenly, Do-Yun was looking at his first living alien. Captain Yuna appeared to be humanoid, but with blue-scaled skin and large dark eyes. She wore robes instead of a military uniform. When she spoke, her voice was soft and musical. "Admiral Do-hyun of Earth, I cannot express our gratitude that you answered our call. We had almost given up hope. Captain Yuna, it's an honor to finally meet. We've come as quickly as we could manage." Do-hyun saw Yuna's eyes widen as she looked at the human ships. The Defiance and her escort vessels were nothing like the graceful Vellani craft. Human ships were angular and gray, covered in armor plating and weapon ports. They looked exactly like what they were, tools of war built by a species that understood violence. "Your ships are very different from ours," Yuna said carefully. "They're designed to fight and win, Captain. That's what you asked for." "Yes, of course. Admiral, we should dock and share information. My science officer has prepared detailed reports on Krek's capabilities and tactics." 2 hours later, Do-hyun sat in the Vellani ship's conference room with his senior officers. The room was decorated with flowing artwork and soft lighting. Everything was designed to promote peace and calm discussion. It made the humans feel like they were sitting in a museum instead of a warship. Chief Science Officer Kangman activated a holographic display showing Krek's vessels and weapons. The enemy ships looked brutal and efficient. Dark metal hulls bristling with weapons, no wasted space for comfort or beauty. "The Krek's dominion has been expanding for over 3,000 years, Kangman explained. They have conquered hundreds of worlds and dozens of species. Their military technology is far advanced beyond anything we have." Lieutenant Commander Ji-hoon, the human intelligence officer, studied the data carefully. "These ship designs are impressive, but I noticed something strange. All their weapons seem designed to cause maximum damage to unarmored targets. Where are their defensive systems?" Kangman looked confused. "Defensive systems?" "Armor plating, point defense guns, emergency bulkheads, ways to protect the ship and crew during battle. The Kreks do not believe in defense, only attack. They overwhelm enemies with superior firepower." Ji-hoon exchanged glances with Admiral Do-hyun. "Sir, these Kreks tactics would work fine against undefended targets, but they've never fought anyone who could shoot back effectively." Dr. Suman, the human fleet's medical officer, had been quietly examining Vellani biological data. Now she looked up with a troubled expression. "Captain Yuna, I need to ask you something personal. Your people have been genetically modified, haven't they?" Yuna seemed surprised by the question. "Of course. Centuries ago, our ancestors decided that aggression and violence were holding back our civilization. We engineered those traits out of our genetic structure. It allowed us to focus on trade, diplomacy, and scientific advancement." The human officers sat in stunned silence. Finally, Dr. Suman spoke again. "You removed your ability to fight?" "We removed our desire to fight. Violence became impossible for us to consider." Admiral Do-hyun felt a chill run down his spine. "Captain, you do realize what you've done? You've made your entire species helpless against any aggressive enemy. We believed that rational negotiation could solve any conflict. But the Kreks don't want to negotiate. They want to destroy you." Yuna's large eyes filled with tears. "We know that now. Too late." The meeting was interrupted by alarms blaring throughout the ship. A young Vellani officer rushed into the room. "Captain! Krek scouts have found us! 3 ships approaching fast!" Admiral Do-hyun was already moving toward the door. "How long until they arrive?" 15 minutes, Admiral." "Signal! The fleet! Combat positions!" Captain Yuna watched in amazement as the human officers transformed. The polite diplomats she had been speaking with suddenly became cold, efficient military professionals. They moved with purpose and speed that her peaceful people could never match. On the bridge of the Defiance, Admiral Do-hyun took his command chair as his crew prepared for humanity's first space battle against aliens. The Krek's scouts appeared on the tactical display, 3 dark ships moving fast toward the refugee fleet. "They're not slowing down," reported the tactical officer. "They're coming straight for us." "Weapon status?" "All systems ready, sir. Railguns loaded, missile tubes prepared." "Sir, we're getting a transmission from the Krex ships," said the communications officer. "Let's hear what they have to say." The main screen showed a Krex commander. The alien looked like a cross between a lizard and an insect, with multiple eyes and sharp teeth. When it spoke, its voice was full of cruel amusement. "Humans of Earth, you have made a mistake coming here. The Villani belong to us. Their suffering belongs to us. Leave now, or we will add your screams to our collection." Admiral Do-hyun stood up slowly. "This is Admiral Do-hyun of the United Earth Space Forces. You will withdraw immediately or face the consequences." The Krex commander laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "You are new to space, little humans. We are ancient and powerful. We will teach you pain." The transmission ended. On the tactical display, the Krex ships opened fire with energy weapons designed to disable rather than destroy. They wanted prisoners to torture. "All ships, engage the enemy," ordered Do-hyun. The human response was swift and terrible. 12 destroyers opened fire with railguns that launched metal slugs at a significant fraction of light speed. The projectiles tore through Krex shields like paper and smashed into their hulls with devastating force. The first Krex scout exploded in seconds. The second lost its engines and began spinning helplessly. The third tried to retreat but was cut down by missile strikes. The entire engagement lasted less than 3 minutes. Admiral Do-hyun looked at the debris field where 3 Krex ships had been. "Tactical, scan for survivors." "No life signs detected." "Sir." Captain Yuna had been watching from the Villani ship. Now her voice came over the communication system, shaking with shock. "Admiral, how did you destroy them so quickly? The Krex have never been defeated in battle." Do-hyun studied the tactical data from the fight. "Captain, these Krex may be cruel, but they're not very good at actual combat. Their weapons are designed for torture, not warfare. Their ships have no real armor. They've been fighting defenseless targets for so long they forgot how to handle an enemy that fights back. But they seemed so confident. Bullies usually do, until someone stands up to them." Dr. Suman had been analyzing the wreckage. "Admiral, I'm detecting some disturbing technology in those ships. Devices designed specifically to cause pain without killing. These Krex aren't just conquerors, they're sadists." Lieutenant Jehoon nodded grimly. "Sir, if this is what they use on helpless refugees, we need to be prepared for much worse when we face their main fleets." Admiral Do-hyun looked out at the Villani refugee ships, filled with families who had been running in terror from these enemies. "Then we better make sure we're ready for them." As the human fleet prepared to escort the Villani to safety, none of them realized they had just fired the first shots in a war that would change the galaxy forever. 3 weeks after the first battle, Admiral Do-hyun's fleet escorted a convoy of refugee ships toward a safe system near the Galactic Rim. The Villani weren't the only survivors they had found. Word of humanity's victory had spread, and other species were seeking protection from the human fleet. Captain Min-seok stood on the bridge of his destroyer, the UES Retribution, watching the strange collection of alien vessels around them. The crystal-based Nethri traveled in ships that looked like floating gems. The aquatic Dulans used vessels filled with water. The insectoid Threx moved in hive-like structures that buzzed with activity. "Sir, we're receiving another distress call," reported his communications officer. "It's coming from the Kepler 438 system, a Dulan's colony world." Min-seok checked his tactical display. The main fleet was still hours away. "How many ships can we spare?" "Just us and the Vigilant, sir. Everyone else is protecting the refugees." "That will have to do. Set course for Kepler 438, maximum speed." 4 hours later, the 2 human destroyers dropped out of faster-than-light travel near a blue-green world covered mostly by oceans. Immediately, Minseok knew something was wrong. There were no orbital stations, no traffic between the planet and its moons. Just silence. "Sir, I'm detecting Krek ships on the surface," reported the sensor operator. "But they're not moving. They appear to be parked." "Parked?" "Yes, sir. Like they're planning to stay for a while." Minseok felt his stomach tighten. The Kreks never stayed on conquered worlds. They destroyed everything and moved on. What could they be doing here? "Send a stealth probe to the surface. I want to know what's happening down there." The probe transmitted its findings 20 minutes later. Minseok watched the data feed and felt sick. The Kreks had herded the surviving Dulan's population into a series of underwater cities. But these weren't prison camps. They were hunting preserves. The images showed Krek soldiers releasing groups of young Dulans into the ocean and then chasing them for sport. The water turned red with blood as the aliens were caught and killed. But some were kept alive, forced to watch as their children were hunted down like animals. "Sir," said the sensor operator quietly, "the probe is detecting organized hunts happening in 12 different locations across the planet." Captain Minseok had served in the resource wars. On Earth, he had seen humanity at its worst. But this was something beyond normal cruelty. This was evil for the sake of evil. "Signal the Vigilant. We're going down there." "Sir, we only have 2 ships. Intelligence reports suggest there might be 50 Kreks vessels on the surface. Then, we better make every shot count." The 2 human destroyers descended through the planet's atmosphere like falling hammers. They found the first Kreks hunting party in a shallow sea near the northern continent. 20 Krek soldiers were chasing a group of Dulan's children through the water, laughing as their prey tried desperately to escape. Captain Minseok didn't hesitate. "Fire!" The Retribution's guns spoke with thunder. High explosive rounds tore into the Krek soldiers, ending their hunt permanently. The surviving Dulan's children floated in the water, too shocked to move. "Launch rescue boats. Get those kids to safety." The pattern repeated across the planet. Human ships would arrive at a hunting ground, destroy the Kreks with overwhelming firepower, and rescue any survivors they could find. But each site revealed new horrors. At the 3rd location, the humans found adult Dulans who had been forced to hunt their own young. The Kreks had used torture and drugs to break their minds, turning parents into predators against their own children. Sergeant Jeho led the Marine boarding party that captured the Kreks commander responsible. The alien was brought to the Retribution's brig, where Captain Minseok tried to question it. "Why?" Minseok asked through the translator. "Why do this to helpless people?" The Kreks commander looked at him with multiple insect-like eyes and spoke in a voice like grinding metal. "Because we can. Because their pain feeds us. Because breaking something beautiful is more satisfying than creating something ugly." "You're monsters. We are perfect predators. You humans are young and stupid. When we finish with these water dwellers, we will come for your soft pink world and teach you the same lessons." Sergeant Jeho stepped forward. "Sir, permission to show this thing some human lessons." Minseok wanted to say yes. Every fiber of his being wanted to let his Marines do to the Kreks what the Kreks had done to innocent children. But that wasn't who humanity claimed to be. "Negative, Sergeant. We're not like them." "Sir, with respect, maybe we need to be." That night, Captain Minseok filed his report to Admiral Do Hyun. The rescue operation had saved 3,000 Dulan survivors, but 20,000 more were dead. The Kreks had been using the planet as a torture resort for over 2 years. Meanwhile, Intelligence Officer Hyeri had been analyzing captured Kreks data cores from the destroyed ships. What she found made the situation much worse. "Admiral," she reported during the next fleet briefing, "the Kreks dominion is larger than we thought. Much larger." The holographic display showed a 3-dimensional map of the galaxy. Red markers indicated Kreks territory. It stretched across 3 spiral arms covering thousands of star systems. "They've been expanding for over 3,000 years," Hyeri continued. Our analysis suggests they've consumed over 200 intelligent species. Each conquest follows the same pattern. Complete destruction of the victim species' ability to fight back, followed by decades of systematic torture and murder. Admiral Do-yun studied the map grimly. How many ships do they have? Conservative estimates suggest over 10,000 combat vessels. Most are larger and more advanced than what we've encountered so far. Captain Yuna, who had been listening to the briefing, spoke up. Admiral, you've already done more than we dared hope. Perhaps it would be wise to evacuate the surviving species to the outer rim and establish a defensive line. You want us to run and hide? I want you to survive. The Kreks are too powerful to fight directly. We should be grateful for the lives you've already saved. Admiral Do-hyun looked around the room at his officers. He saw Captain Min-seok's haunted expression as the man remembered the hunting grounds. He saw Sergeant Jae-ho's clenched fists as he thought about the tortured children. He saw Dr. Suman's clinical anger as she reviewed medical reports on Krek's torture methods. Captain Yuna, I understand your concern, but you're missing something important about humans. What is that, Admiral? We don't run from bullies. We never have. Intelligence Officer Hieri pulled up another display showing human military production. Sir, Earth's industrial capacity has increased by 400% since we received the Vallani distress call. We're launching new ships every day, but even at maximum production, it will take years to build a fleet capable of challenging the Krek's dominion directly. Then we don't fight them directly. We fight them smart. Admiral Do-hyun walked to the center of the room. The Kreks have been expanding unopposed for thousands of years. They've never faced real resistance. They're not prepared for a species that fights back intelligently. What do you propose, sir? Asked Captain Min-seok. We hurt them. We make them afraid. We show every species in the galaxy that the Kreks can be defeated. Elder Kangmin, the senior Vallani representative, looked worried. Admiral, the Kreks do not feel fear the way we do. They are creatures of pure malice. Then we'll teach them a new emotion. As the meeting ended, Captain Yuna lingered behind. Admiral, may I speak privately? When they were alone, she looked at him with her large, dark eyes. I fear we have made a terrible mistake. What do you mean? We asked you to save us from monsters, but I am beginning to suspect we have awakened something even more dangerous than the Kreks. Admiral Do-yun was quiet for a long moment. Captain, the difference between us and them is simple. We only become monsters to fight monsters. And when the monsters are gone, we can go back to being human. Can you? Once you have seen what the Kreks do to innocents, can any of you truly go back to who you were? Do-yun didn't answer. Deep down, he suspected Captain Yuna was right. But some prices had to be paid to protect the innocent, even if the cost was humanity's soul. The transmission arrived during the night shift aboard the UES Defiance. Communications Officer Taemin was monitoring routine traffic when every human ship in the fleet received the same horrific broadcast. It was from Warlord Vectar, Supreme, commander of the Krek's Fourth Fleet. The message showed Ambassador Taemin, the same Vallani who had sent the original plea for help to Earth. But this wasn't the dignified diplomat the humans remembered. The Kreks had been working on him for weeks. Taemin's blue scales were cracked and bleeding. His large eyes were clouded with pain and drugs. Krek's torture devices had been attached to his body, sending constant waves of agony through his nervous system. But the physical torture wasn't the worst part. Tell them, commanded Warlord Vectar's voice from off-screen. Tell the humans what your people really are. We are worthless, Taemin whispered, his voice broken. We are weak creatures who deserve to die. We have brought this suffering on ourselves through our cowardice. And what about your human protectors? They are fools, young stupid fools who will learn the same lessons we have learned. Pain, despair, the knowledge that mercy is a disease that must be burned away. The broadcast continued for 20 minutes. The Krex had broken Taman completely, forcing him to renounce everything he had once believed in. They made him beg the humans to abandon the refugee fleets. They made him describe in detail how the Krex would torture human prisoners when they were finally captured. Admiral Do-hyun watched the entire transmission in his ready room. When it ended, he sat in silence for several minutes. Then he activated his personal communicator. "Get me Earth." "Command, Priority Alpha." The response from Earth was swift and absolute. President Nari herself appeared on the secure channel, flanked by the entire Defense Council. Her face was pale with rage. "Admiral, we've seen the broadcast. How do you want to proceed?" "Madam President, I'm requesting full authorization for unrestricted warfare against the Krex Dominion." "Explain unrestricted warfare, Admiral. No prisoners, no mercy, no negotiation. We hunt them down and we finish them." There was a pause as the Defense Council considered this. Finally, President Nari spoke again. "Admiral, you're talking about genocide." "No, Madam President, I'm talking about pest control." "Authorized." "Admiral Do-hyun, you now have command of all Earth military forces. General Sung-hoon is being recalled from the outer colonies to oversee fleet production. We're moving to total war status." "Understood, Madam President." "Admiral, one more thing. The broadcast wasn't just sent to our ships. The Krex transmitted it across every communication channel in this sector of the galaxy. Every species that's ever heard of humans now knows what happened to Ambassador Taman." "Good. Let them see what happens when you hurt our friends." 3 weeks later, the human fleet had grown from 12 ships to over 300. Admiral Do-hyun stood on the bridge of his new flagship, the UES Retribution's Thunder, and watched the tactical display show Krex positions throughout the sector. Captain Yuna had been transferred to the new command ship, along with representatives from all the refugee species. She watched the humans prepare for war and felt a cold fear growing in her chest. "Admiral," she said quietly, "surely there must be a way to negotiate with the Krex. Perhaps we could offer them something in exchange for peace." Admiral Do-hyun turned to look at her. His eyes had changed in the weeks since Taman's torture broadcast. They were colder now, harder. "Captain, did you watch the same transmission I did?" "Yes, but—" "Then you saw what they did to your friend. You saw how they broke his mind, made him betray everything he believed in. You heard their plans for human prisoners. I understand your anger, Admiral, but no." Do-hyun's voice cut through her words like ice. "You don't understand. You can't understand. Your people removed the capacity for righteous anger from your genetics. But we didn't." Commander Yoonji stepped forward from her position at the tactical station. "Admiral, we're receiving reports from our scout ships. The Krex have established another processing facility in the Vega 7 system." "Processing facility?" "Yes, sir. Intelligence suggests they're using it to break captured refugees from various species before moving them to the hunting preserves." Admiral Do-hyun studied the tactical data. Vega 7 was a heavily defended system with at least 50 Krex ships. A direct assault would be costly. "How many prisoners?" "Estimated 12,000, sir. Mixed species." The bridge fell silent. Everyone knew those 12,000 beings were suffering the same fate as Ambassador Taman. Being broken, being forced to betray everything they had once believed. "Commander Yoonji, take Task Force 7 and hit that facility." "Sir, we'll be outnumbered 4-1. "Then don't fight fair." 6 hours later, Task Force 7 dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Vega 7 system. Commander Yoonji studied the enemy positions from the bridge of her heavy cruiser, the UES Unforgiving. The Krex had built their processing facility on the surface of Vega 7's primary moon. 50 ships patrolled the system, confident in their overwhelming numbers. They had never encountered human tactical thinking. "All ships, implement Plan Butcher," Yoonji commanded. Plan Butcher was simple and brutal. The human ships spread out across the system, making the Krex think they were retreating. But instead of running, each ship launched clouds of stealth drones armed with nuclear warheads. The drones drifted silently toward Krex positions, while the human ships continued their apparent retreat. The Krex commanders laughed at human cowardice and began pursuing what they thought were fleeing enemies. The drones detonated simultaneously. Nuclear fire bloomed across the Vega 7 system as 43 Krex ships died in the first 30 seconds of combat. The 7 surviving vessels tried to flee, but human ships were already in position to intercept them. "No survivors," Commander Yunji ordered coldly. The last Krex ship exploded as Marines stormed the processing facility on the moon's surface. What they found there made even hardened soldiers sick. The Krex hadn't just been torturing prisoners. They had been experimenting on them, trying to find new ways to cause pain, testing the limits of different species' ability to suffer. Sergeant Jeho led the rescue teams through the facility's corridors. In one room, they found Nethri prisoners, whose crystal bodies had been slowly dissolved in acid, keeping them alive and conscious throughout the process. In another, Dulans had been removed from their water tanks and left to slowly suffocate in the open air. "Sir," called one of his Marines, "you need to see this." Jeho entered a laboratory where Krex scientists had been dissecting living prisoners to study their nervous systems. The walls were covered with detailed charts showing the most effective ways to cause psychological trauma to different species. "Burn it," Jeho ordered. "Burn it all." As the facility erupted in flames behind them, the Marines evacuated the surviving prisoners. Of the 12,000 beings who had been brought to Vega 7, only 300 were still alive. "Commander," Yunji filed her report to Admiral Dohyun with cold efficiency. "Vega 7 facility destroyed. Enemy fleet eliminated. 300 survivors recovered." "What about the Krex personnel at the facility?" "No survivors, sir." "Good." Captain Yuna had been listening to the reports from the bridge. "Admiral, your people executed prisoners." "We executed monsters." "But surely some of them could have provided intelligence." "Captain." Admiral Do-Yun turned to face her directly. "Let me explain something about human nature that your genetic modifications prevented you from understanding. When someone tortures children for entertainment, they forfeit the right to continued existence. You're talking about murder. I'm talking about justice." Dr. Young-ho, the fleet's xenopsychologist, had been analyzing Krex behavior patterns. "Admiral, I need to brief you on our findings." "Go ahead, Doctor." "The Krex aren't just sadistic, sir. They're addicted to causing suffering. Our analysis suggests their entire society is built around the systematic torture of other species. It's not just what they do, it's who they are." Captain Yuna looked horrified. "Surely there must be some Krex who oppose these practices, some who could be reasoned with." Dr. Young-ho shook his head. "Captain, imagine if your people were genetically modified to require the pain of others to survive. That's what we're dealing with. The Krex literally cannot exist without causing suffering." "Then what are you suggesting?" Admiral Do-Hyun answered. "For him. We're suggesting that some species don't deserve to exist." The bridge fell silent. Even the human officers looked uncomfortable with that statement. "Sir," said Captain Minsok quietly, "are we still the good guys?" Admiral Do-Yun looked out at the stars, thinking about tortured children and broken ambassadors. "Captain, I stopped caring about being good the day they showed us what they did to Taman. Now I only care about being effective. As news of the Vega 7 raid spread across the galaxy, every species received the same message. Humanity was no longer just fighting to protect refugees. They were hunting the Krex with the same systematic efficiency the Krex had once used to hunt others. The galaxy was about to learn that humans were very, very good at hunting. 6 months had passed since the torture broadcast that changed everything. Admiral Do-Hyun stood in the command center of the massive space station New Geneva, humanity's new military headquarters in the Outer Rim territories. Through the observation windows, he could see the largest fleet in galactic history preparing for the final assault. Over 2,000 human ships hung in formation around the station. Destroyers, cruisers, battleships, and massive carrier vessels that had rolled off Earth's production lines in an endless stream. Humanity had transformed itself into a war machine with a single purpose: the complete destruction of the Krex dominion. Admiral, reported Intelligence Officer Hyeri, our deep penetration scouts have confirmed it. The Krex are evacuating their core worlds. Evacuating to where? Unknown, sir, but their fleet movements suggest they're retreating toward the galactic center. They're abandoning territories they've held for thousands of years. Captain Yuna, who had grown thin and pale during the months of war, stepped forward. Admiral, this could be our chance for peace. If they're retreating, perhaps we could negotiate. No. Admiral Do-hyun's voice was flat and cold. We don't negotiate with cancer. We cut it out completely. The Vallani captain flinched at his words. Over the past months, she had watched humanity transform into something that frightened her more than the Krex ever had. The polite, helpful species that had answered her desperate plea for help was gone. In its place stood something relentless and terrible. Sir, said Captain Min-seok, the final assault fleet is ready. All ships report combat-ready status. Signal the fleet. Begin Operation Cleansing Fire. As the human armada began moving toward Krex core territory, Captain Yuna made one last attempt to reach the man Do-hyun had once been. Admiral, what happened to Ambassador Taemin was horrible. But look what you've become in response. Look what all of you have become. Do-hyun turned to face her. His eyes were empty of warmth, empty of the compassion she had once seen there. We became what was necessary. You became worse than the Krex. Did we? The Krex tortured innocents for pleasure. We hunt monsters for justice. There's a difference. Is there? Your ships glass entire worlds without checking for civilians. Your soldiers execute prisoners without trial. Your people speak of genocide like it's a necessary chore. Admiral Do-hyun was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was soft but terrible. Captain, 6 months ago, your friend Taemin was a dignified diplomat who believed in peace and negotiation. The Krex broke his mind so completely that he begged us to abandon you to their mercy. They didn't just kill him, they destroyed who he was. I know. I remember. Good. Because every time I consider showing mercy to the Krex, I remember that broadcast. I remember what they made him say. And I remember that they laughed while they did it. The first battles of Operation Cleansing Fire were unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Human fleets struck 12 Krex systems simultaneously, using tactics that shocked even their own allies. Instead of engaging enemy fleets in traditional combat, the humans bypassed military targets entirely. They went straight for Krex population centers, orbital habitats, and breeding worlds. The message was simple: surrender completely or watch your species die. Commander Yunji led the assault on the Krex fortress world of Keth Prime. Her task force didn't bother with a siege. They simply surrounded the planet and began bombarding it from orbit with kinetic weapons that struck like meteors. Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the surface, reported her communications officer. Put it through. The screen showed a Krex commander surrounded by the ruins of what had once been their planetary capital. Human vessels, we request terms for surrender. There are no terms, Yunji replied coldly. You have 1 hour to evacuate all Krex personnel from the planet. After that, we glass the surface. You cannot be serious. This world has been our stronghold for 2 millennia, 59 minutes. The Krex evacuation was chaotic and desperate. Transport ships fled the planet's surface carrying as many of their people as they could manage. But there weren't enough ships. Millions of Krex were left behind when the hour expired. Commander Eunji gave the order personally. All ships commence planetary bombardment. The surface of Keth Prime burned under the fury of human weapons. Cities that had stood for thousands of years became molten glass. The planet's atmosphere caught fire, creating a globe of flame visible from space. Similar scenes played out across Krek's territory. Humanity didn't just defeat their enemies, they erased them. Worlds that had been Krek's strongholds for millennia became lifeless rocks floating in space. The speed of the human advance shocked every species in the galaxy. The Krek's dominion, which had seemed invincible for thousands of years, collapsed in mere weeks. But it was what happened next that truly terrified the galaxy. 3 weeks after the last Krek's world fell, President Nari of Earth addressed the hastily formed Galactic Council. Representatives from dozens of species had gathered to discuss the new balance of power now that the Kreks were gone. The human president appeared on screens across thousands of worlds. She looked tired but determined. Behind her stood Admiral Do-hyun and the other human military commanders who had led the campaign. "People of the galaxy," she began. "The Krek's dominion is finished. Their fleets are destroyed. Their worlds are empty. Their species—" She paused. "Their species no longer exists." A murmur of fear rippled through the council chambers. Several alien representatives looked sick at the confirmation that humanity had committed complete genocide. "Some of you are afraid of what we've become," President Nari continued. "Some of you think we went too far. Let me be very clear about something. We don't care what you think." The chamber fell silent. For thousands of years, the Kreks tortured and murdered innocents while the rest of you did nothing. You formed trading agreements with them. You signed non-aggression pacts. You looked the other way while they turned entire civilizations into hunting preserves. Elder Kang Min, speaking for the Vallani, stood up shakily. "President Nari, we were defenseless. We had no choice. There's always a choice, Elder. You chose to survive by ignoring the suffering of others. We chose to end that suffering permanently. But the cost was one species of monsters in exchange for hundreds of species of innocents. That's a bargain I'll take any day." Admiral Do-hyun stepped forward. "Ladies and gentlemen of the Galactic Council, let me make humanity's position very clear. We are now the dominant military power in this galaxy. We have ships patrolling every major space lane. We have sensors monitoring every inhabited system." "What are you saying?" asked a representative from the Nethri. "I'm saying we're watching, all of you. If any species decides to follow the Krek's example, if anyone starts enslaving other races, committing genocide, or torturing innocents for pleasure, we will respond the same way we responded to the Kreks." The threat hung in the air like a sword. Every representative in the chamber understood what Admiral Do-hyun was promising. "You're threatening to police the entire galaxy," said the Dulan's ambassador. "We're promising to protect it," replied President Nari, "whether you want our protection or not." As the conference ended, Captain Yuna found herself alone with Admiral Do-hyun in an empty corridor. For the first time in months, she saw a flicker of the man he had once been. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked quietly. "Regret what?" "What you became." "What all of you became." Admiral Do-hyun looked out through a viewport at the human fleet patrolling the space around the station. "Captain, I used to lie awake at night thinking about the Krek's children we killed during the bombardments. I wondered if some of them might have grown up to be different from their parents. And now I remember that those same Krek's children would have grown up to torture innocent beings for entertainment. I remember that their parents fed them the screams of other species young. So no regrets?" "None at all," Captain Yuna nodded sadly. "We asked you to save us from monsters, Admiral. We got exactly what we asked for." "Yes, you did. But in saving us, you became something worse than monsters. You became our masters." Admiral Do-hyun was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft but implacable. "Captain, every species in this galaxy had the chance to stand up to the Kreks. Every species chose to look the other way rather than risk themselves for others. You created a power vacuum that could only be filled by those willing to do what needed to be done, and now you fill that vacuum. Now we fill that vacuum. The galaxy has its guardians, Captain, whether it likes them or not. As Captain Yuna walked away, Admiral Do Yun remained at the viewport, watching human ships patrol the stars. The galaxy was at peace now, a peace enforced by the threat of overwhelming human retaliation against anyone who disturbed it. The Kreks were gone. The innocents were safe, and humanity had taken its place as the galaxy's apex predator. It wasn't the ending anyone had imagined when Captain Yuna first sent her desperate plea to Earth, but it was the ending that innocent species across the galaxy could live with, whether they wanted to or not.